Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 228. Today I'm going to talk about Neuroshima Hex 3.0. This is a re-release of the base game, which I believe was released like 5 years ago or so. This was released recently at Gen Con 2013. I played this game actually a ton on the iPad before I even got this. And it's a very interesting game. Basically it's a two-player game, but with this you can play up to 5 players. And you can actually play it solo as well, which I've tried and is interesting. I'll explain that. So it's basically, you know, like a head-to-head tactical combat game. Each player has a different army set in the Neuroshima universe. And it's really not like a game that I've seen at all. So I'm going to just jump into how it works. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the extra components and new stuff that's in the 3.0 here. And then I'll come back and give you my thoughts. Okay, here you can see all the components in the game. It comes with this really cool looking board. You can kind of see there's a large kind of destroyed city in the background there. It looks pretty neat. Then their game comes with 5 armies, and actually a bonus army there of the Doomsday army is a little bonus army included with this set here. And each of the armies comes with this handy, very handy player aid here. And you can see a little sort of description or layout of all the different tiles that come in the different armies, what they do. As you can see, there's a lot of iconography there, which is, you know, relatively hard to keep track of. Having these is really nice because you can have, you know, one player with this one and then one player with this one. You can say, what does that one do? Okay, that's going to be quite a bit to digest, especially the first several times that you play it. You know, it had actually been some time since I played this recently, and I definitely had to sort of constantly refer to these because there's a lot of little triangles, you know, that do different things. It's not too bad, but it's just, you got to sort of get your feet wet and kind of get back into it if you haven't, you know, if you put it on the shelf for a while there. So you got these, you got different tiles here, which are sort of like decks, and so they're fixed for each faction. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to set up your headquarters on here, and then basically draw 3 tiles and then play some of those every turn. You've also got some tokens here for, you know, managing hit points, and then there's nets and things like that that will happen, you know, that'll disable certain units, so you've got tokens to keep track of all that good stuff. And that each player is going to have a little life point tracker. And I'll show you the headquarters in a minute, but basically as your headquarters takes damage, then you're going to track this all the way down, and then you're either going to play till you run out of tiles, and then whoever has the most hit points left wins, or you're going to play till you destroy one of the headquarters. The game also comes with this deck of these puzzle cards, and you're supposed to play these single player. Basically what they do is they give you sort of a little setup here with, they tell you what tiles to put out, and then they give you these tiles here. And then they give you sort of the remaining hit points of each of your headquarters. And then it says, you know, like for example, use 3 of the 5 tiles in order to win after you make your choice and the final battle commences. So you kind of do this, and then you basically try to be the winner. And so these are different difficulty levels here, and I think there's 55 of them. So I've only done a handful of these, but this is actually a really good way, I would think, to learn the game. Now, like I said before, I'd played this a ton on the iPad, and I still find these very interesting, but I could see if you were a new player wanting to get into Neuroshima Hex, these will be really cool because they really kind of help you sort of understand the flow, how the positioning works, how the different units, based in the different situations, are going to work. So these are really cool too. So let's walk through a little bit of setup and a couple little kind of turn examples, and then I'll come back and tell you my thoughts. So if you look here at the board, you can see it's kind of divided up into sort of a main section with a nice thick border around, and then you have a little extra column or row encircling the main board there. You've also got a hit point tracker here, so the game only comes with 4 of these, but if you were to have like a 5th player, then you can use this here and use a token to track, you know, the hit points of the 5th faction. Now it does say that you should use the, you know, the larger board if you have 5 players, but there's no reason you couldn't, you know, play a 2-player game with the larger board. You can kind of do what you want with this game and sort of customize it. I'll talk about that more in a second. Now the very first thing players are going to do is they're going to put out their headquarters here. So you can see each of the colors has a headquarters with a little different special ability here. And for example, let's see, this one here, there's a couple icons here to sort of make note of. So the blue ones, any adjacent units here are going to get +1 in their initiative. The red one is +1 strength in their ranged attacks, and you can see here the sort of the smaller rectangle or triangle here for the yellow is the plus in the melee attack. So you can see you've got sort of the long skinny is going to mean ranged, and then the little bumper there is going to be melee. And then this one's interesting. This is the outpost, the 5th faction, and this doesn't have anything to do with adjacency, but basically any one of the units can rotate once per turn. And then we have the green one here, which is they get sort of a double action on their initiative there. You can see all of these headquarters have an initiative 0 here. So we'll explain initiative and the attacks here in a minute, but basically you're going to put these out and have a little starting position there. And then there's a few ways that you can start the game out. It gives you a couple of variants. You could start off with 3 tiles, or you could start off, with 1, and then the second player has 2. But after you get going, basically you're going to draw up to 3 tiles, and then you have to discard one of those tiles here. So, for example, here, most of the tiles are going to be these different units here. So you can see on this guy, he's got an initiative of 2, and he's got a ranged attack going in these 2 directions. So if he was facing this way, then he would basically be able to attack this direction range and then that direction range. So the facing of the unit is also going to be very important, as well as the initiative. Basically what's going to happen when we have a battle, which I'll explain in a second, we're going to count down from initiative. So the higher initiative ones will attack first, all the way down to 0 who will attack last. So the lower initiative tiles may not get an attack if a higher initiative tile has hit them first and removed them from the board. So the first thing you're going to do is you have to figure out which one you want to discard, and then you've got 2 left that you can play. Maybe play 1 or both, or keep 1 for later, and then the other player is going to go. You're going to keep going until either you fill up the board with these hexes here, at which point it's just going to trigger an automatic battle, and then we're going to, like I said, resolve all the different special effects that are out here, as well as working down from the initiative of the higher initiative ones to the lower initiative ones. So we can see here we have a level 3 initiative, and he's got quite a few directions that he's going to attack all at once. He's going to attack all those surrounding hexes at once, and then we're going to resolve all the 3s. So all the 3s basically happen simultaneously, effectively, and then you're going to remove anybody that needs to be removed, maybe mark them with a hit point if they've got some extra toughness on a unit. Most units takes 1 hit to remove them, and then once the battle's resolved, you're just going to keep going. Now there are special tiles here that are going to do a lot of things. The first one to take note of are these battle tiles. So every faction has at least a few of these, and what they're going to do, if you want, is you can actually play this, and then you're going to have an immediate battle, resolve all the effects, and then move on from there, just as if you had filled up the board. So this can be advantageous if you've got a opportunity where you see I've got a little bit of an advantage to get some board advantage or something like that. You can play that, and you want to use that at an opportune time. You've got some other ones here, like this one will increase each of the attachments here. So if we put this guy here like so, then this one will actually buff up his ranged and or his melee ability there. And then we've got this one here. This is like a medic here, basically giving it sort of a hit point, if you will. So if this guy were to take damage, then you could discard the medic instead and he'll remain on the board. And you've got this one here, which is basically like a push. And then this one here, which is a move. So if you play this, effectively you can move a unit to an empty spot, and then the push one will actually push a unit backwards, so we could push this back here. And then you've got also the net here. So the net's kind of neat, because if you put the net here, you can see the net actually doesn't have any initiative. It's not really going to attack or anything. So we can put this on here, and we can put one of our little net tokens on whatever the attached unit is there. That's basically going to disable it, so that's kind of cool too. So that's not going to basically do anything until this unit here is removed, and then the net will come off. So that very basically is the game. You're basically playing out units, trying to get some good position, keeping in mind facing, trying to protect your headquarters, trying to figure out if it's a good time to play these attack tiles, and sort of planning hopefully several turns in ahead to have a better outcome of the battle, because there's going to be a lot of destruction and removement of pieces as this happens, and you basically you really want to keep your headquarters in a good position. So really the trick to this game, and I will just say right now that the game is a very difficult game in some ways, especially kind of a new player versus an experienced player. And a lot of it's going to come down to learning the strengths and weaknesses of the different factions, but also, just as an aside here, kind of keeping in mind that it's not necessarily just about playing everything for its effect. you definitely have to sacrifice things in this game, and there is a little bit of feinting. I wouldn't call it bluffing, it's more like feinting. And knowing what's left in each of the stacks, really knowing your opponent's faction versus your faction, and how each of the factions is going to play against each other. So if I play the yellow faction here, which is the hegemony, excuse me, versus the Moloch, which is the red, that's going to be quite a bit different if I was playing against the green faction here, the outpost. So let me just quickly give you a general idea about what each of the factions focuses on, and I'll talk a little bit about the fifth faction that's in the game. So first we've got the outpost here. This is the green faction, and this one is very mobile. So you can see some of these units actually already have mobility on them. So once per turn you can actually just move them for free without having to play one of the move tiles. But you can see they actually have 7 of these move tiles in their units here. So there's a lot of different things that are going to be happening here. Lots of movement, trying to get around and outflank, and then sort of surprise and get things out like that. So that's kind of the outpost there. Next we've got the Moloch here, and these are sort of the opposite. There's not a lot of movement. They also don't have a lot of battle tiles. So with the outpost they can kind of move around, get a nice little opportunity and throw out a battle. But these guys have some toughness on them. So you can see this guy here has actually got 2 toughness, and he's got some armor and stuff on there. This guy has got some different high initiative attacks. This one's also got an Airstrike, which is an interesting tile. Basically, you can play this down and then blow up a bunch of, or effectively hit a bunch of units that are adjacent. Doesn't apply to the headquarters though. It also got some nets and things, but basically these are sort of big beefcakes here, and you've got your armored hunter here. You can hit all these different sides, and then you can see the armor indication there. Now we've got the Borgo. This is the blue colors here, and they've got some different interesting things here. Basically you're trying to raise the initiative here, so you can see all friendly adjacent units to the HQ gets +1 initiative, so they'll be able to attack a little bit earlier. This guy is sort of an interesting character here, so you can see he's going to throw a net down in that direction, but he's going to hit 3 times also in that direction, so he can disable maybe a higher initiative character, and then also slam the junk out of them and probably destroy them here. And you can see some of these guys have like double attacks here. He's got a double attack in that direction, but he's going to hit twice, and then 1 attack in each direction there. So that is pretty interesting little faction there. Next we have the hegemony here. This is probably my favorite faction. It's most like the red faction in some ways, but it doesn't have as many pushbacks, but it's got some nets, so you can sort of try to maneuver and get people sort of ensnared in your nets. It doesn't have, let's see, it's got the 1 ranged guy, but a lot of these are close combat melee attacks there. So this one, just for whatever reason, is my favorite out of the factions there. And then finally we have the 5th faction, the Doomsday Machine. This one is, I'm still kind of getting used to this one, because there's not really any movement, but they have sort of these abilities that are able to jump across other units. So most of these are going to affect whatever adjacent units, but these can kind of stretch out and affect units that are hex away, or all hex, or even if they're not anywhere close to, like the headquarters for example. And then there's some of these that'll like redirect attacks and things like that. So this is a real funky unit here, and that's the Doomsday Machine. This is the kind of the bonus add-on here, and that's the basic gist of the game. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the overview. This one took me a few plays to get into. So I would say if you play this once or twice and it doesn't really, wet your whistle, if you will, I would give it a couple more plays. It definitely took me, I don't know how many, but it was several. It wasn't like 10 or anything. But there was enough there that I kind of kept wanting to investigate because it had been around for so long, and there were several people that liked it. I think it's relatively highly ranked on Board Game Geek. But it definitely took me a little bit to get into and sort of figure out the game. And really, that's kind of a nice thing, because you've really got to learn each faction. Like I said, you want to learn how one faction works against the other. And the other thing that for me was something that I had to kind of get over was really the timing of the game and sort of how you can plan for the game. Now, I don't think I mentioned this in the walkthrough. I'm almost positive I didn't. When you play with the tiles, they're all going to be face up, of the 3 that you have. So you are going to know what's in the deck and what's left, but you're also going to be able to see kind of what you know, what your opponent has left and things like that, and you kind of have to gauge in that way what they have left. Maybe they're holding a battle tile or something like that, so you're going to know that they're doing that. Maybe that they're going to be planning to toss that out at you, or maybe they're bluffing with that. So it's an interesting sort of metagame above and beyond just knowing what each faction does and what their strengths are. But as the board kind of evolves naturally in the game, then you have to sort of be able to sacrifice guys and maybe put them in positions where you maybe don't worry too much about attacking the other player's headquarters right away, but you maybe absorb a couple of hits in your headquarters. And there's going to be some, you know, give and take back and forth with that as players kind of learn and play with each other. One thing, you know, to know is that, you know, when you first thing you do is you set up the headquarters, the natural tendency, at least for me, was to put my headquarters in the opposite corner of the other player. But, you know, why don't you just put the headquarters right next to the other player? That's kind of an interesting little tactic there. And they're like, oh, he's just going to surround me. You know, he's got nets and things like that. He's just going to try to, you know, rush in with some melee combat or something like that. So the above and beyond each of the different abilities of the factions is the sort of tendency to want to play around with the board space, and that is definitely part of the game that makes it a little bit obtuse, is like really playing around, knowing the factions, knowing all the abilities, and also knowing all the different situations, which is why I think those single player puzzle cards are so interesting, because they set up all these kind of different scenarios for you to kind of puzzle across. Now that's the interesting part of the game, which leads me into my kind of final thought here, is this is like a hybrid game where it's got that sort of Ameritrash, you know, battle, explosions, blood and guts kind of thing happening, which is really cool. But it's not really a hybrid with a Euro, it's like a hybrid with an abstract. It's like Go or something of chess or something. You know, we have just board positioning, real abstract, what appeared to me originally to be very dry and sort of methodical and very puzzly. It's really not. It marries those two things very nicely, and I don't think there's a game really like that. So it's not a Euro Ameritrash hybrid, it's like an abstract Ameritrash hybrid, which is interesting, and it works. It works well. And I think it works well as a two-player game as well as a single-player game like that, but as also a multiplayer game. Now, one of the problems that I tend to have, and this maybe is more of a personal thing than I think a sort of, well, let's take a little break here from being a board game reviewer. I have personal biases, and I have what I think sometimes is a mathematical wrongness with the game, and maybe my personal bias informs that sometimes. But back to my point is that I think this works well in a multiplayer game where I usually have a problem with some of these battle games with a multiplayer game, because you have a lot of this like, oh, you ticked me off earlier, I'm going to attack you and stuff like that, and that's fine. But you also have people like, you know, just making king making in a way, and it's like, well, that's not that fun. I don't know why. That really irritates me a lot of times when there's a king making thing happening, or it's just like, oh, what can do anything? I don't know what it is. It just kind of depends on the game too, but they can get in this kind of weird state where it's just like, okay, you decide who wins. That's kind of strange. Now this game plays quick enough. The box is 30 minutes, but it's probably a little bit longer than that, especially when you add players. If you know the game, you can definitely get done 30 minutes to an hour for sure. It shouldn't go much longer than that. But you can play around with it. You know, you can have like an experienced player play 1 versus 2, and he's got 20 hit points, and the other guys have 13 or whatever. You can kind of handicap it and move it back and forth. So that's really cool. And because you only see so many tiles, it basically kind of makes you kind of just do what you can within a certain context, that you're not just like negotiating for the win. You're like, well, put a guy here. Well, I don't have a guy, and if I have a guy, I'm going to use him for how I'm going to use him. I'm not going to let you negotiate me away and stuff like that. So it kind of pairs out some of that stuff, that extra frilly stuff that I'm not a huge fan of. So like I said, it's a nice pairing of abstraction and the battle stuff. I hate using that word Ameritrash, but it's battle smashing in your face trash stuff. So it's cool. It works at all player counts. I think I haven't played it with 5. I only played it with 1, 2, and 3. But I'm sure it's fine with, you know, working working those over. It just depends on what you want to do, and that's, like I said, it's kind of a configuration thing. You can set this up and play it however you want, multiple different ways, increase and decrease the size of the board and all kinds of stuff. So it's really this kind of toolbox, and you can take turns playing different factions, and, you know, play blue versus green and yellow versus red and all that stuff like that. So anyway, that is Neuroshima Hex 3.0. Thanks.